the murder of Laken Riley, and the controversial law that followed. On an otherwise ordinary day, 22-year-old nursing student Laken Riley set out for a jog on the University of Georgia campus, a routine she had followed countless times. Little did she know that this simple act of fresh air exercise would end in tragedy, sparking a national debate on immigration laws and their relationship with crime. Jose Ibarra, an undocumented migrant from Venezuela, was later arrested for her brutal murder. The details of the case, painted by investigators as violent and premeditated, quickly ignited outrage across the country. Within weeks, Riley's name and story had become synonymous with calls for legislative action, culminating in what is now known as the Laken Riley Act. Emerging from the outcry surrounding Riley's murder, the Laken Riley Act proposes to enforce strict measures against undocumented immigrants accused of crimes such as theft and robbery. One of its most controversial stipulations is that detention and deportation can occur based solely on accusations, bypassing the traditional requirement of a formal conviction. The legislation aims to deter crimes allegedly linked to undocumented migrants, but it has also raised questions about constitutionality and fairness. Supporters argue that the proposed law highlights the urgent need for reform to prevent such tragedies. Meanwhile, critics warned that its aggressive provisions threaten to undermine basic legal principles such as the presumption of innocence. The act has quickly become a flashpoint in the broader discussion of immigration and justice. Laken Riley's death was a devastating blow to her family, her community, and her college peers. Known for her kindness and dedication, she was close to fulfilling her dream of becoming a nurse. Her untimely death unraveled a portrait of youthful optimism cut short by senseless violence. Investigators identified Jose Ibarra, a 27-year-old undocumented Venezuelan migrant, as the prime suspect. Ibarra's history was not without blemish. He had previously been involved in misdemeanor crimes but had managed to avoid severe legal consequences due to gaps in immigration enforcement. His undocumented status placed him at the center of a divisive political conversation, where his actions became a case study for systemic failures in controlling irregular migration. Laken Riley's murder sent shockwaves across the nation. Public opinion on the incident quickly galvanized, with conservative voices emphasizing that stricter immigration enforcement might have prevented her death. Around the country, protests demanding justice for Laken intertwined with calls for sweeping reforms in migration policies. Her case became a rallying cry for those advocating for tougher border and deportation measures. Media coverage further heightened the emotional intensity surrounding the case. News channels and social media platforms revisited her story repeatedly, each retelling emphasizing how the crime represented a broader social failing. This intense media focus helped build momentum for legislative initiatives aiming to link crime prevention and undocumented migration. At its core, the Laken Riley Act proposes radical measures to manage undocumented migrants accused of certain categories of crimes, positioning itself as a crime deterrent. The legislation grants authorities the ability to detain and deport undocumented migrants accused, though not necessarily convicted, of theft, robbery, or similar actions deemed a threat to public safety. One provision outlines the unprecedented ability for states to sue federal agencies should they feel enforcement of immigration laws is inconsistent. Proponents argue this is necessary to hold various levels of government accountable. Critics, however, highlight that assigning such authority to states could instigate bureaucratic gridlocks, further complicating an already strained immigration system. Perhaps the most contentious clause involves removing the necessity for a conviction before detention or deportation. Legal experts have pointed out that this bypasses traditional judicial safeguards, potentially paving the way for misuse and wrongful detainments. Supporters of the legislation regard it as an overdue intervention. Conservative lawmakers and advocacy groups argue that the act is not just about justice for Laken Riley but about sending a clear message: the United States will no longer tolerate irregular migration as a gateway to potential crimes. Proponents suggest that accusations could serve as an adequate legal threshold to prevent dangerous individuals from remaining in the country. In their view, the burden of waiting for a conviction when safety is at stake poses an unacceptable risk to communities. Additionally, in light of former President Donald Trump's expected hardline approach to immigration, supporters believe that passing the Laken Riley Act fosters continuity in stringent national policies. The bill has also seen support from some Democrats, a reflection of changing political attitudes post-2024 elections. While the proposed law has gained traction, it faces significant opposition from legal experts, advocacy groups, and civil rights organizations. Critics argue that basing deportation solely on allegations, rather than proven guilt, not only undermines constitutional principles but also creates a dangerous precedent. One consistent criticism addresses its potential to overburden an already saturated judicial system. Rose Herrera, from the National Immigration Law Center, warned that unverified accusations leading to deportation could overwhelm immigration courts. Furthermore, the absence of rigorous checks increases the risk of wrongful deportations, especially against innocent individuals unfairly accused. Organizations such as Voto Latino have articulated concerns over possible racial profiling. They argue that Latino immigrant communities might disproportionately face accusations, leading to stigmatization and public distrust. Many believe that without solid correlation between undocumented migration and crime rates, the act may do more harm than good. The legislative measures proposed in the Laken Riley Act could have far-reaching implications, not only for undocumented immigrants but for society as a whole. If the bill becomes law, it would set a precedent for undermining the principle of innocent until proven guilty, in the name of public safety. For undocumented communities, the fear of false accusations could contribute to increased societal isolation. Individuals might be hesitant to report crimes or cooperate with local authorities, creating an unintended ripple effect where violent crimes go unreported. Deportation without trial also risks severing families, as accused individuals are expelled without thorough investigation of their circumstances. This deterrence-based legislative tactic could also damage the broader image of America as a nation that historically respects the rule of law and due process. In a political climate marked by division, the Laken Riley Act has become a focal point for shifting attitudes toward immigration. Many Democratic lawmakers, traditionally seen as advocates for inclusive immigration policy, have started to back stricter enforcement measures to align with changing electorate moods post-2024. The Act's supporters hope its passage would resonate with Donald Trump's anticipated presidency, which is likely to further enforce tight border control and deportations. For proponents, its symbolic alignment with incoming national policies strengthens its potential to pass into law. Critics, however, contend that bipartisan support for such draconian measures reflects a troubling trend, where political parties focus on appeasing voter anxieties rather than proposing evidence-based solutions. They argue that this shift could lead the U.S. into an era marked by reactive policymaking rather than strategic reform. The Laken Riley Act poses an unavoidable ethical dilemma: is prioritizing public safety over constitutional fairness justifiable? For some, it is a resounding yes. The law is seen as an essential safeguard against future tragedies like Laken Riley's death. However, skeptics caution that sacrificing legal principles for efficiency erodes the foundation of democracy itself. The question of whether fear can justify bypassing due process looms large. Immigration advocacy groups argue that the law uses fear-driven narratives around undocumented criminals as a scapegoat for systemic issues. Meanwhile, proponents uphold it as a pragmatic step to secure the nation's domestic stability. The murder of Laken Riley was a heartbreaking incident that captivated the nation, but the Laken Riley Act has proven to be equally polarizing. Supporters argue that the legislation honors her memory by closing legal loopholes that allowed her murderer to remain in the country. Meanwhile, critics warn about the chilling impact it could have on civil liberties and immigrant communities. As this legislation continues to divide opinion, the larger question remains: how should America balance its need to ensure public safety with its commitment to uphold justice and human rights for all? The Laken Riley Act poses no easy answers but reminds us of the complexities inherent in resolving America's immigration crisis. Through its passage or rejection, the country will make a choice not just about the law but about its evolving identity in a world of increasing migration and diverse communities. The debate is far from over. Whether regarded as a necessary reform or an overreach, the Laken Riley Act represents a pivotal moment in how the United States navigates the intersections of crime, justice, and migration policy.